Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the thematic track titled Technologies for a Net Zero Iron and Steel Sector, curated in collaboration with International Energy Agency and the Energy and Resources Institute, TERI. I am Palakana, Research Associate. I'll be the MC of this session. To begin with, I would like to share the list of the amazing panel that we have today. Ms. Rebecca Berry from British High Commission, Ms. Tiffany Voss from IEA, Ms. Neha Verma from Ministry of Steel, Mr. Dipendra Kashiwa from SEMA, Ms. Sugandha Jaiswal from Tata Steel, Mr. Biswadeep Bhattacharjee from Pre-Metals, and Girish Sethi from TERI. To begin with, I would like to invite Ms. Rebecca Berry, Second Secretary, Climate and Energy Policy Officer, British High Commission, New Delhi, to deliver the introductory remarks. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. And thanks to Ms. Neha Verma, the Director of Ministry of Steel, our esteemed panelists for the discussion today, as well as colleagues from the International Energy Agency and TERI for putting on this event at the World Sustainable Development Summit today on technology for net zero in the iron and steel sector. At COP26 in Glasgow, UK, along with India and 43 other countries, launched the Steel Breakthrough Agenda. The breakthrough aims to accelerate progress towards making near zero emission steel the preferred choice in global markets, with the efficient use and near zero emission steel production established and growing in every region by 2030. And together through this breakthrough, countries will work together to accelerate progress towards this goal. And more recently at COP28, the Steel Standard Principles were launched. And the principles recognise that the iron and steel sector accounts for approximately 8% of annual global greenhouse gas emissions and calls for the establishment of common methodologies on measuring greenhouse gas emissions within the sector in order to accelerate the transition to near zero emissions. And more than 35 key steel producers, industry associations, standard setting bodies, international organisations and initiatives have all endorsed these principles. And here in India, it's the world's second largest steel producer as well as consumer. Rapid urbanisation and the increase in per capita steel demand, estimated to be about 321 kilograms by 2050, means that it's critical to decarbonise and accelerate low emission technologies in order to achieve net zero by 2070. And India is really taking steps to do this. So under India's green hydrogen mission, the government of India released guidelines for utilising green hydrogen in the steel sector with the aim of establishing a green hydrogen ecosystem. And last year, the Ministry of Steel formed 13 task forces for the decarbonisation of the steel sector, collaborating with industry, academia, think tanks and different ministries. With both the government and private sectors joining hands and moving together, India can aim to gradually decrease the greenhouse gas intensity of steel. And in the UK, we have an energy efficiency task force, which aims to reduce energy demand through promoting energy efficiency across the economy. And the task force aims to reduce the total UK energy demand by 15% from 2021 levels by 2030 across domestic and commercial buildings and industrial processes. The UK's iron and steel sector offers some key technologies, solutions and best practices in the areas of green hydrogen, CCUS, so the carbon capture, utilisation and storage, artificial intelligence and other technologies. The UK and India have experience of working together in this space as well. Through our joint programme called Accelerating Smart Power and Renewable Energy in India, the UK and India are working to share knowledge on clean technologies in the steel sector. The Adiksha platform launched by the Honourable Minister R.K. Singh last year is just one example of this. It's a one-stop shop for industrial energy efficiency technologies for the heavy industries such as steel. So I really look forward to continuing to collaborate with India and partners to accelerate the progress towards decarbonising the sector through energy efficient technologies. And I really look forward to hearing the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rebecca Berry, for your introductory remarks and setting up the stage for the entire session. Now, moving on, I would like to invite Ms. Tiffany Voss, Industry Analyst, IEA, to give the presentation on technologies for a net zero iron and steel sector. The stage is yours, ma'am.
Yes. Yes, yes. Great. Well, Thanks very much. And to begin with, I'd really like to thank TERI as well as the UK Foreign Office for the collaboration on this event today, and also for all of you for joining us for the discussion. So my name's Tiffany Voss. I'm with the industry team at the International Energy Agency. For any who might not be familiar with the IEA, we're an intergovernmental organization established in the 70s around the oil crisis. Since then, our mandate has expanded quite broadly, and our mission is to advance the dialogue on sustainable and secure energy for all. And we're really happy to be here at this event and to discuss on kind of the situation here in India, as we see India as really a key partner on the energy transition. And so the purpose of my presentation is a bit to sort of set the scene for the discussion we'll be having. I'm focusing mostly on the global perspective of the transition for the steel sector, and then in the panel we'll get a lot more in depth onto the situation here in India. And so the overall framing for our pathway for the iron and steel sector is the IEA's net zero emissions by 2050 scenario. This is in which the global energy system achieves, as the name states, net zero emissions by 2050. Really, though, integral to this pathway is the acknowledgement that every country needs to set its own path according to its own capabilities and its own plans. And really also integral to it is the idea that cooperation globally can help advance the transition for all. And so there's a lot of different milestones of what needs to happen for different technologies and different sectors, and just the selection is shown on the screen. For example, it says that already today we need to have no new coal-based capacity additions in the power sector. By 2030, we need to triple the amount of renewable energy capacity globally, and we need to double the improvement in energy intensity. And all the way out to 2050, we need to have about 90% of power generation coming from renewables. So it's a very ambitious pathway. And within that, we also, of course, have goals for the industry sector. One of those highlighted here is that by 2030, we need to have all new heavy industry capacity to be near zero emission capable. And what we mean there is it doesn't necessarily mean it's near zero emission to start, but rather that it's with technologies that already achieve a significant improvement in emissions relative to current performance, but they have sort of the capacity is there to reduce to near zero emissions over time, so without needing new capital investment. And really, there's a whole other range of milestones for the industry sector. And we really see, of course, industry as integral to the transition. So currently, globally, the industry sector is about 9 gigatons, or about 25% of energy sector emissions. And about 80% of those are in emerging market and developing economies, who are really key to industrial production. And in our near zero emissions scenario, we see that being reduced by over 90% globally by 2050. So again, a very ambitious scenario. Key to that really is heavy industry. So cement, iron and steel, and chemicals account for 70% of the emissions. And we all are well aware that this is not an easy challenge. We often refer to these sectors of having emissions that are hard to abate. This is partially because they are very reliant today on fossil fuels to provide high temperature heat as a reduction agent and also as a feedstock. And fossil fuels do their job very well in these sectors. They're an inexpensive way of providing these services, and we don't really have the technologies ready yet today to, say, move to electrification. And this is a difference from some of the other sectors, such as passenger transport, or even in the electricity sector, where the technologies are already available and need to be rolled out. In the industry sector, there's still an innovation challenge that needs to be overcome. And so when we look at the near zero emissions scenario for the heavy industry sector, about 50% of the emission reductions in that scenario will come from technologies that are not yet on the market. So these are not technologies that we don't know, but rather they're in the pilot or demonstration stage. And so for this scenario, it's really imperative that in the next couple of years, we see large scale demonstration of these technologies so that they can be ready to begin early deployment already well before 2030, and then from 2030 onwards to really accelerate widespread deployment around the globe. One of the reasons that this is so critical is because industry assets are capital intensive and long lived. So we see plants lasting for anywhere from 25 years up until 40 years or even longer. And so really the 2050 or even anywhere in mid-century is only one investment cycle away. And so the sooner we can have these technologies ready to deploy, we can reduce the chances of locked in assets. In addition to that, it's already important to be thinking about how we can have capacity ready to incorporate these technologies, even if they aren't available today. So what are the decisions we can make when we're adding capacity now for how we can design those plants to be ready to incorporate these technologies when they become available. So innovation is key, and the faster we can do it, the better. Now getting into the iron and steel sector in particular, what we find in our analysis is that, not surprisingly, it's quite a range of different strategies that are needed to decarbonize the sector. So particularly in the near term, material efficiency and energy efficiency and fuel switching within current processes are really key. So this is the picture for steel production at the global level out to 2050 in our scenario. And we can see that production is quite flat. And the reason for this is because of a strong push on material efficiency. So we see about a 20% reduction by 2050 relative to a baseline scenario where we aren't pushing on these material efficiency strategies. And so this includes really strategies all across the value chain. This is in steel plants, reducing losses within the processes. This is also in the end uses, extending building lifetimes, having lighter weight vehicles, etc. On top of that, there's a really key role for scrap-based production. And so we can see that out to 2050, the role of scrap in the sector increases substantially. So from about a third of inputs today to about half by 2050. This is for two reasons. One is just increasing global availability as we have more capacity or steel stock reaching the end of life. We have more availability, but also an increasing push on greater scrap collection. So there's already very high rates of scrap collection globally. About 85% of scrap is collected, but we can maximize those rates across all end uses to help achieve these goals. However, what we find is that scrap is not available at sufficient quantities, even when we maximize its collection to meet all of steel needs. So we will need to find ways to decarbonize primary production. And this is probably one of the most challenging parts of the transition for the steel sector is how do we address primary production? And so in our net zero scenario, we see the entry of these innovative near zero emission routes. We see those already starting to make an entrance by 2030. So already we have at the global level, 8% of production is near zero emission. And then out to 2050, it becomes 95% of primary production would be using these near zero emission technologies. And so what do we mean here? One of the key routes is, of course, direct reduced iron based on hydrogen, and this hydrogen being derived from renewable resources like solar and wind. This is sort of the leading route, accounting for 2/3 of the near zero emission production in our scenario by 2030 and about 45% in 2050. Another key route is carbon capture and storage, and this can be applied to, of course, a variety of different plants. This is on natural gas-based direct reduced iron, but also on blast furnaces. This could be applied to new blast furnaces, but also retrofitted onto existing capacity. And then there's also a role for application on innovative smelting reduction routes. And so this captures about a third of the near zero emission production in 2030 and 40% by 2050. And the last key route is more direct electrification, so iron or electrolysis. This is a bit earlier on currently in the innovation stage, so we don't really see a major entry by 2030. But by 2050, we expect this to have come online and account for about 15% of the near zero emission production. And so how are we doing? We're tracking quite carefully at the IEA the different project announcements for this type of near zero emission production. And so I should note that we haven't seen, I guess, a full commercial role or production yet, but we're watching closely a number of different companies that are saying that it could be within the next couple of years that they'll have first commercial scale production. So in particularly in Sweden, the hybrid project and H2 Green Steel are two of the leaders, but there's also quite a few other companies who are looking into this quite intensively. And so when we look at project announcements, we see that a lot of the near zero emission capacity being announced would be with hydrogen-based direct reduced iron, but there is not a lot of clarity on how quickly that transition will happen. So when we look at projects that make very clear that they're aiming for 100% renewable hydrogen in the near term, this amounts to, as we can see, it's around 10 or 15 megatons of production. And this is about 12% of what we see as being needed by 2030 in our near zero emission scenario. If we look at then projects that are talking about direct reduced iron, making some comment on hydrogen, but not necessarily being clear on how quickly they're going to move to 100% hydrogen, and maybe if they're aiming for 100% or something much lower, we would actually get up to over 50 megatons of iron, and this would take us about halfway to our 2030 objective if they did actually get to 100%. Another key thing to note is the regional distribution of these projects. We see a lot of the project announcements today in Europe. There's some in the rest of the world, but it shows there's a need to kind of expand beyond the European market. And so to get towards what we see as being needed in the near term, we would need to have more project announcements, more clarity on the project announcements that have been made, but really more innovation to get this ready and more kind of finance and cooperation to get these projects spread across the globe as well. And just a word also on the infrastructure needs. So there's the steel production capacity itself, but then behind these near zero emission technologies are what enables them. So for the hydrogen-based route, electrolyzers will be key. And so this is from our hydrogen team. They're tracking total announcements of electrolyzer capacity. So this isn't just for the steel sector, but it's for all the various different end uses. We reached just under a gigaton of global capacity in 2022, and we saw continued expansion in 2023. If we look at announced projects that have reached a financial investment decision, that brings us to about 14 gigawatts of announced projects by 2030 that should be online. You can see quite a bit of it is clustered either in Europe and China. If we look, though, at the broader range of project announcements, these are ones that are less certain, that haven't reached a financial investment decision yet. We can see that the pipeline of electrolyzer capacity grows quite significantly, so to 420 gigawatts that could be online by 2030 if these projects can get financed. And we see that there's much greater geographical distribution there. About 100 different countries are announcing projects, and we can actually see a really big role for India, accounting for about 10% of those announcements. Now, behind the electrolyzer, then, if we're looking at renewable hydrogen, is the renewable electricity capacity, and the kind of capabilities or costs of that capacity will be really key to the economics of all of this. And so if we look again at our net zero by 2050 scenario as a benchmark, if we were to have really a strong push on policy, we see that hydrogen could be reaching costs of about 1.5 US dollars per kilogram by 2030. And this sort of maps out where the costs would be reaching that level. We can see that some regions have a competitive advantage, and here's another place where India stands out. And so countries and regions that take advantage of that could see a strong potential even for exports, whether it's of hydrogen itself, but also for upgrading to products like iron or like steel and exporting those. So key opportunities there. Finally, a word on carbon capture and storage, sort of the other main near zero emission route. We're seeing here also increasing momentum in the past couple of years after what had been a bit of a period of stagnation. And one of the reasons is increased kind of cooperation and innovation on business models. And so conventionally, there's been a lot of business models that were trying to look at the full value chain, carbon capture and storage. But recently we've been seeing actors enter that are looking at just part of the value chain. So for example, providing CO2 storage or CO2 transport or capture solutions, but not the full chain. And this is actually helping in terms of lowering the risk, having CO2 hubs that can enable cooperation by the different actors. And we see this as a way to potentially reduce lead times, give access to more actors, and help move things along faster. And my final slide, is just where does policy come into all of this? So it's quite a technology challenge that is needed, but we really see that there's a broad range of policy tools that will be needed. And we see across the world and here in India as well, governments are starting to, or have been for a while and are increasing to look into these different tools. But really it needs to be a collaboration from all the different actors. We see a need also for setting sort of the overall framework of what are the targets, what are the policies that set the direction of travel. So things like carbon markets, also finance instruments. But then we also need some targeted policies that can address the really specific challenges of the industry sector. So of course, increased R&D to get these technologies onto the market really as soon as possible. Also demand creation so that steel producers know that there's a buyer when they're producing lower near zero emission steel. A push on material efficiency is also needed, targeted policies that increase collection rates and also look to get steel being used more efficiently. And finally, there's some enabling conditions that are necessary to underpin all of this. This includes looking at kind of the global picture, considering that industrial products and steel are globally traded. How do we ensure a level playing field, but also the flip side of that is really global cooperation to making it easier for everyone. There's need, as mentioned, for focused effort on infrastructure that underpins these technologies. And finally, we see an important role for data and the methodologies behind that. So how do we measure emissions? What do we mean when we say green steel? And having a common understanding on that can really underpin a lot of the other mechanisms here. And that's one of the areas we're working on at the IEA as well. I'll close there and looking forward to the discussion with all of you on this.
Thank you, Tiffany, for the comprehensive presentation. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Neha Verma, Director, Ministry of Steel, to share her perspective on the theme. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Tiffany, for setting the context and saying most of what I wanted to say. Thank you so much. So, I would just like to tell you that all of you in this room would definitely agree that India is at a very critical juncture right now. On one hand, we are slated to grow. We are already growing at a very high pace, and we need more steel to back up that economic growth. And as you might be knowing, our steel policy says that by 2030, we'll be doubling our steel production to 2030 to 300 million ton. On the other hand, steel is the most carbon emitting sector, and in India, steel contributes to 12% of the carbon emissions. So definitely we have to find a balance, and we are committed to grow sustainably and responsibly. And Honorable Prime Minister has already laid a target for us to be net zero by 2070, and the ministry is aligned totally with the target, and we are taking all the necessary steps to move towards it. But however, the steel is a difficult sector to decarbonize. Carbon is very intrinsic, as has been told by Rebecca and Tiffany. It's very intrinsic to the steel making process, not only for energy needs, but also for reduction needs and as a feedstock. So it's not easy to transition towards green pathway just by switching the fuel as it's for the other sectors. So we have to look for the whole gamut of solutions ranging from carbon minimization to carbon capture to carbon avoidance. We are exploring everything. Ministry has, Rebecca has already told about. We have created 14 task forces. It's now 14, not just 13. We have added one more to cover various solutions. So we are looking at two enablers for the transition. One is defining what is green steel. Another one, developing a market for the green steel. Third one is measurement of the emissions from the steel industry. The process is not yet formalized in India, so we want to formalize that one also. On the production side, we are looking at energy efficiency solutions, renewable energy transition, green hydrogen, CCUS, material efficiency, as well as process transition from thermal coal towards natural gas. And also recently we have added another one on biochar. We are also exploring how biochar can be used in steel making. Then we are also looking at various facilitators like international cooperation, DMD, skilling, upskilling, finances, etc. So out of the whole gamut of solutions we are looking forward to, as Tiffany has already told, that we have to, we are looking at one window till 2030 and then beyond that. So till 2030, there are technologies which are over the horizon but not yet there. So we are focusing mainly on renewable energy transition and energy efficiency solutions. And we have estimated that if we have 100% penetration of these two solutions, we can reduce our carbon emissions by almost by like 20-25%. But to go beyond that, we definitely need to have technological solutions which are not currently available. If we talk about here and now, there is no such alternative process of steel making available, commercially viable in the world anywhere right now. Even the hybrid project so much talked about will be up for commercial deployment only after 2026. So India is at crossroads. On one hand, we have to expand, and we have to expand right now. We have to start. We have to go for greenfield expansion right now, because then only we'll reach our target by 2030. But on another hand, we also have to reduce our carbon emission intensity. While there are no solutions, technological solutions, which can be adopted right now. Already we have a legacy capacity of blast furnace, which will be there till 2030, 2040, and might be in stranded asset if we don't find solutions to decarbonize blast furnace. So this is a very big task for us, very challenging task for us. So how do we decarbonize and expand simultaneously? But however, we are planning to adopt new technologies beyond 2030. So green hydrogen becomes a very, very important fuel for us in the future, feedstock for us in the future. And all the planning for the future technologies again have to be starting now. So we have to start thinking about these newer routes now, so that by 2030 we are ready to adopt them. So in this direction, I would like to urge IEA to kind of find solutions which are available to the world. You know, what I'm trying to tell right now is that there are a lot of agencies, a lot of platforms working towards this direction, a lot of actors, IDDI, FMC, Steel Breakthrough, you just mentioned, IEA. There are multiple actors which are trying to move along with the world, with the international governments and partners. But however, there is not much real action on the ground, and the action will come when technology transfer takes place. We still have few years. There are projects slated to be up and running by 26, 27 in the fields of green hydrogen, CCUS, or molten oxide electrolysis. But then what? They have to also start thinking about IPRs. Will India be able to afford those IPRs, the price associated with those IPRs? How do we move forward? So that is one direction in which I would urge international agencies working in this space to start thinking about, that there should be a global platform where these technologies come in and there is an open discussion about the IPRs. It's not just that one company or country or collaboration is working on a particular technology and again the rest of the world has to buy those solutions. Carbon abatement is a global public good, and cleaning up that global shared environment is a collective responsibility of everyone. So that's why we need to devise a solution. We also understand that, yes, those who are working on new technologies will be driven by the profit. Definitely, this is a world driven by profit. So there has to be, they also need a motivation to go ahead. But as an international community, we can work together to find the solutions of these problems. So that is one very strong point I want to make, that while addressing the technologies for future, which are upcoming, of course, research and innovation are the backbone of new technologies. There has to be financing and funding towards R&D. We are also doing that. We are also trying to rope in as much finance in R&D, but an international community is also doing. But on the other hand, the need to share those technologies with the developing countries is also very, very important and should be looked into. So in the end, I would just like to say that India has already delivered on renewable energy front by meeting its target much before time. India is again going to deliver on green hydrogen front because MNRE has come up with a great scheme to nudge the whole industry is dependent on fuel which can move towards hydrogen to take up that direction. And India will definitely deliver on clean energy front, clean steel front. But we can go only so much ahead with our enthusiasm and ambition. We need collaboration with the world. We need to work together. We need to move ahead together. And India is ready to partner with as many countries as possible in this area. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your address and highlighting the need for technology transfer and research and development at the same time. Moving on, I would request Ms. Tiffany Voss to moderate the panel discussion. And before we move to the panel discussion, one speaker, Mr. S. Subharaj, couldn't join us due to the last minute engagement. So I request Ms. Tiffany to take over the stage and moderate the session. Thank you.
There we go. Is this good? Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks very much. So yeah, looking very much forward to hearing now from the steel producer perspectives. And so we have three esteemed panelists, and one joining us online and two here in the room right beside me. And I think maybe the easiest might be for them to introduce themselves and their company, and for the first round of question, as well as telling us what your company or organization is doing on low carbon technologies in the steel sector. So I'll pass it first to Mr. Kashava from SEMA.
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to put forth my views from the DRI industry perspective. We all know that the DRI industry is going to play a major role in mitigation of the carbon footprints. All over the world, India is also targeting to switch over from the very energy efficient DRI route. As far as India is concerned, we are the world's largest DRI producer for last 20 years, but major production comes through the coal-based DRI route. A route which has got is not so eco-friendly, has had a CO2 emission of about 2.7 to 3 tons CO2 per ton of the crude steel. So as an association, my association is targeting how to make it energy efficient and eco-friendly. One of the things which we are advocating nowadays is to ensure that this coal-based producer should switch over to the gas-based route. But the problem is that they have got a limited financial capabilities and other limitations like the managerial capabilities and all that. So they cannot switch over immediately like the world minimum models of 2 million ton of a gas-based DRI. We are trying to develop a smaller gas-based model, say about 0.3 to 0.5 million ton, which will suit them to their requirement and will be financially very much within their reach. But for that, there is no such plant working anywhere in the world. Tenova has such plant of 0.25 million ton in Abu Dhabi, but that has been closed for last so many years. We in India and SEMA as a association, we are trying to develop, design and develop such a smaller models in consultation with the IIT Delhi, MECON, a consultancy organization under the Ministry of Steel, and major major technology supplier like Midrex technology like HYL. And I feel that within a few months, we will have some concrete proposals and the project will take off. We are also looking the support from the Minister of Steel in our endeavor. Second thing which can immediately reduce the carbon footprint, as Madam has said, that the easiest way is low-hanging fruits to adopt the material efficiency, energy efficiency technologies, which does not demand much financial support and switch over from thermal energy to the renewable energy. Most of the production, around 45 production comes from the secondary steel sector route, and they are heavily dependent on a thermal energy. Although since they are adopting the electrical route, their carbon emission is around 1 ton of CO2. But even if we switch over from thermal energy to the renewable energy, this will further come down. And since their contribution is almost 50%, and as in the nation steel policy, their contribution has been further increased by 2030 around 45%. So this segment is going to play a very important role, not only the augmenting steel production in the country, but also in the CO2 emissions role. So, and secondly, we are producing around 80% of a gas-based route, DRI. But there is no natural gas available at the moment. There is no syngas available, and there is no green hydrogen available. So what are the options for them? And an option for the government, I am sure Madam will take note of it. The entire world is talking about the transition from the natural gas to the green hydrogen. But we already have a very limited capacity. We are importing around more than 50% of our natural gas requirement, and we'll continue to import to that extent. So transition from the natural gas to the green hydrogen is a difficult proposition. And that is why, if you all know that Ministry of Petroleum, Natural Gas and their undertaking GAIL has set up a gas pipeline from Uttar Pradesh to the West Bengal, from Jagdishpur to the Hazira. And that covers the entire eastern belt, which is a hub of steel production, and covering the public sector and private sector steel plant, DRI plants, and pellets plant, like Tata's, both the Jamshedpur and this Kalinga plant, they are covered, but no one is coming forward. Why? When there is an infrastructure available and with the investment of 30,000 crore rupees, why the steel producers are not coming forward? The reason is that there is a sense of uncertainty about the availability and the price. So government has to assure the industry that they will be supplying at a affordable price of natural gas on a continuous basis, because the steel or DRI is a continuous process. So one of the things which we are advocating, we are interacting with the government, different government department, is to ensure the natural gas availability at a affordable price. When I say affordable price, it means it should be comparable with the coking coal prices. If you are going to shift from the blast furnace route to the DRI EF route, the economy will also play a greater role. So it should make economic sense, not that I'm a businessman, not that since I have to reduce my CO2 imprint, I have to switch over to the DRI or to the technology, net zero technology, what was told or Madam has told about the molten oxide electricity process or something like that. So I cannot go. I'm a businessman. I have to see the economic viability, what I'm doing. I have to survive. So we should have a affordable raw materials affordable basic raw material like the iron ore, gas, and all that. And Madam Vas has told that coal consumption will come down if we do this thing. Unfortunately or fortunately, India has got the 5th world largest coal reserves. We have to go for the coal-based route, but we have to choose such processes where our CO2 emission are less. One of the most promising is a production of the syngas, and to utilize the syngas for the production of DRI or in the blast furnace route. Blast furnace route will offer only the opportunity to reduction of the CO2 by 15 to 20%. Tata has done a lot of the work. They have used the green hydrogen, and they have also come to the conclusion that we can't 100% substitute the coking coal or the mat coke or the OPSI by using the 100% hydrogen. It is not possible. So the option green or the most promising option is the DRI route. So syngas is a possible and will suit to the Indians' requirement. India can afford. We have got a raw material, indigenous raw material, but there are the challenges. Commercially proven technology. We have to develop. We have to look in the world for a commercially proven syngas technology. Since we have got a high ash coal, we have to see that that technology suits to our indigenous requirement. But this technology, syngas production, also offer the challenges. The CO2 emission is higher than even the BF route. As per the Ministry of Steel, I think the average CO2 emission is 2.6 ton per ton of the
Blast furnace?
yes, blast
It varies from 2.2 to 2.5
Right.
from a plant to plant.
Yes, but if we follow the syngas based route where the CO2 emission are much higher, so the only option is to use the CCUs. I think most of you read today's newspaper where the government is going to announce shortly some incentives for the CCUS. This is a very welcome step. I am sure most of the potential syngas producer will come forward now. Ministry of Steel is going also to take a meeting shortly. The Minister of Power and MNRE had a meeting where I also participated, and they have announced the guidelines for they have reserved, they have given certain incentives for availability of for the investment for the capex. I think these are the two measures which will infuse the potential syngas based producer. But as far as the DRI concerned, since we are going to be the user, it is a high investment capex industry. My DRI producer cannot have their captive syngas. What we are looking is that what we are advocating to the government to pursue the CIL or the other potential who are talking to produce the syngas, it should be set up in the vicinity of the cluster of the steel or DRI, or it should be near to the iron ore. Then only the people make use of this, because the transportation and other issues are very complicated. It should be made available at my gate, at the gate of the producer, and it should be at an affordable price. So syngas offers a very, very, very good opportunity for India to reduce their carbon footprints. Thank you very much.
Add a bit, just add a bit. So what, just complementing what Kashipaji has just said, the importance of CCUS for India. So although green hydrogen is very promising, but only for greenfield expansions, and we have an existing legacy capacity. So for blast furnace, and for 70%, 80% of our DRI is based on thermal coal. Either syngas or thermal coal, right now the footprint is same, and the footprint will not reduce without CCUS. So either we go to syngas or we just directly use thermal coal. Right now, it's not going to make a much difference, but CCUS holds about 50 to 60% of opportunity of carbon abatement in India. Beyond CCUS, we will not be able to meet our net zero targets.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
I would just like to add one thing. I've used the word 2.5 to 3 ton CO2 per ton CO2 per ton of a crude steel. But you look entirely for the DRI, it is if we are installing the waste heat recovery power plant, it is 1.7 to 1.8 ton. So by incorporating certain technology, we can still reduce the carbon footprint in the coal-based route. Thank you very much.
Hello. There you go. Thanks very much to Ms. Verma for your contribution. Well, See you later. And thank you, Mr. Kashava, for your perspectives. Let's now pass it on to Ms. Jay as well to hear from Tata Steel's perspective, what you're working on for decarbonization and what are the challenges and opportunities.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will run through a small presentation. Very good afternoon, everyone. So I think Kashiva sir, Neha ma'am had spoken much about what is expected in terms of policy changes for net zero steel sector. So I will just quickly run through the slides, which speaks about what Tata Steel is going to do by 2030 or 2050. So just quickly running through a small introduction on the Indian steel industry. So these are the facts which is known to most of us, that India is second largest producer and consumer of steel. Indian steel industry has been an integral part of its economic fabric, contributing 2% of the national GDP. Indian steel sector accounts for almost 12% of India's CO2 emissions. And talking about Indian steel industry has an emission intensity of about 2.5 tons of CO2. In steel industry is responsible for 280 million ton of CO2 emissions, and BF and BOF route accounts to about 46% of Indian steel production. Next slide. Yeah, I'll do that. Thank you. This is again a quick overview on CO2 footprint of current Indian iron and steel production. So talking about different route, which speaks about BF, BOF, coal DRI. I think Sir has also focused on the coal DRIs, gas DRIs, and IF routes. So this is you can see what is the total scrap that can be used, how is the CO2 intensity varies with the different routes, and talking about the total CO2 emissions. So if you see scrap, as I think Ms. Vas or Neha ma'am has already spoken about scrap, which is going to be an important element going forward if we talk about net zero. Because almost most of our plans, when we talk about EAF routes, is based on the scrap as one of our important inputs to the industry. So sourcing of scrap becomes extremely important. Right now, the exports on scraps is there, and talking about EAF routes. Natural gas, and Kashiba Shah also spoke about natural gas, that large demand supply gap is there, and policy should be moved towards how quickly and how fast natural gas will be available to steel sector. Iron ore, again, EAF needs DRI from high priority iron ore. So typically it is more than 67% of FE. Indian iron ore typically has 62 to 65% of FE in its best quality iron ore. Globally, only 4% of FE has FE more than 67% of iron ore. So we all can see here that how FE content more than 67% becomes important to us. So it is a very scarce sector if we talk about resourcing of iron ore. Yeah. So these are some short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals for envisaging our decarbonized future at Tata Steel. So obviously, we have identified 4 strategic objectives. So we are very cognizant of our business impacts on environment and on our communities. In keeping with this, we are conscious about our environmental performance, and we employ the most stringent systems
processes and controls across our units for monitoring our environmental footprints, incorporating the latest technologies, being mindful about proper waste management, prudent resource allocation, energy savings initiatives, and other measures are our topmost priorities for us. So we take pride in saying this, that the solid waste utilization for us is more than 98%. And we are first steel producer to join Sea Cargo Charter to reduce Scope 3 emission. Coal-based methane injection trial was successfully done in one of our blast furnaces. So we take pride in stating these statements. Just moving towards a little sustainability framework and our approaches towards the business objective. So I'll just quickly run through this slide. Yeah. So I think Neha has also spoken about that, talking about national steel policy and 300 million ton target that has to be completed by 2030. So how are performances over these years in terms of carbon intensity look like? So this is the trajectory that we have, thought of that, and we are working towards it, that how the carbon intensity from FY06 to FY25 will look like. So way forward for us will be to achieve less than 1.8 ton of CO2 per ton of crude steel carbon emissions by 2030, focus on technologies which enable transition to net zero, consistent focus and investment in green technology, and net zero by 2045 is one of the goals that we are looking forward. So, yeah. So here what we have done is we have divided our short-term goals, medium-term and long-term goals, where our focus for by 2025 will be on energy and process efficiency measures. This is in line to what the government is also expecting us to move forward. And as we know that the carbon credit trading scheme has also come into picture, and we are very hopeful that by FY25, we will definitely get some targets, and we have to work on that. So energy and process efficiency measures become extremely important to meet those targets. Again, CCTS system, according to me, is again a PAT 2.0. So we have already been achieving these energy efficiency targets through PAT schemes, where the Bureau of Energy Efficiency were constantly for 3 years of cycle was giving us targets to reduce on the specific energy consumption. So talking about the medium term plans, so obviously growth via scrap-based EAF route will be one of our biggest key emission reducing measures. We'll be using hydrogen rich gas for the tour injection. So again, taking pride in saying that we have successfully completed one of our pilot projects of injecting hydrogen in one of our blast furnaces, and we are again working towards of increasing the percentage. As Sir said, we cannot completely replace hydrogen with the reductant, which is coke, going inside the blast furnace. But as you know, the H2 emissions is only through the PCI route, right, sir? So we can only think about eliminating the PCI injections in the blast furnace and not the overall coke in the entire blast furnace. So carbon CCU and CCS also becomes extremely important when we talk about medium-term objective to reduce emissions. So we have already installed CCU in our Jamshedpur plant, which is a 5 TPD thing, and we are on verge of commissioning CCU
system in one of our Kalinganagar plant. So a long-term goal, if you see, then we'll be modifying the existing blast furnace with CCUS and next investment cycles, offsetting the unavoidable emissions through CCUS, green hydrogen-based DRIs and EAFs, and decarbonize incoming utilities completely. So this is just the explanation of the short-term shifts in business models, so which I have explained to you. These are the two, again, midterm and long-term thing. So what are the challenges and opportunity that we'll be facing in terms of achieving these goals? Now, carbon pricing in India, leading to loss in business profitably will be again one of the challenges that we'll be facing in the new era. Strengthening of climate risk management by international financial community due to regulatory changes, reducing access to capital and increasing the cost of funding. Now, COP28 has also talked about a lot into fossil fuel. So non-compliances to meeting 2-degree Celsius pathway requirements due to delay or failure in adopting low carbon technologies impacting profitability. Implementation of EU CBAM rules will affect Tata Steel exports and lower profits in EU markets. CCTS, which I've spoken, pace of technological development of Tata Steel not matching the pace of demand of low carbon steel products, leading to loss of market share. So opportunities, I mean, what are the opportunities will Tata Steel will look at? Now, increased revenue from the SRBs with downstream steel making capacities comprising of EAFs. So we are in a pathway of actually doing all the project work in one of our EAF plant in Ludhiana. And the second one we are seeing in Chennai, and the third maybe the west, and the fourth will be the east. So these are the plans and or the opportunities which Tata Steel might be taking up in terms of setting up EAFs. Increased revenue on the share of business from enhanced demand for high strength steel, renewable energy capacity, additions to replace thermal power based on fossil fuel. I mean, I do not know how many of you are aware of, but steel sector as per se, the dependency of power plants on thermal coal is like nil, because what we do is we utilize the waste gases coming out of the plant and then feeding into the power plants and gaining power out of it. So on the renewable energy capacity, again, there is a waste utilization. But again, if we say if coke ovens go away or we do not utilize coke in the blast furnaces and hydrogen remains the only solution of reductant in the blast furnace, at that point of time, renewable energy capacity addition to cater power to the steel industry becomes extremely important. So increased revenue with enhanced premium play for from sales for of green certified products through EPDs and eco-labeling. Now, again, what kind of policy support do we exactly need to achieve the targets? So again, I think there is no one from government of India, but I will request IE to frame or take output from such programs and place in front of the government. So first is on the demand creation for this green steel. I mean, green steel coming up, it will be a very premium product. So creating that kind of demand will be again in the government's hand, that what kind of incentives are they going to give or to the steel manufacturers. Push for new technologies, meaningful increase in the corpus and the National Green Hydrogen Mission becomes extremely important. The recent corpus that has been allotted for the pilot project from MNRE is a very welcome step from the government side. So, and we expect such kind of push to come up in the near future. Increasing the scrap availability. Biochar in coming days or coming years is going to be one of our important um, players and which will play a very significant role in potential of increasing the steel production. So green taxonomy is again, which I think Ministry of Steel is also working on. In one of the, this is one of the biggest agenda in the 13 task forces which Ministry of Steel has created. Availability of natural gas, Akashi Basar has already spoken about it. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, many thanks for the presentation and well noted on the policy asks. We'll now turn to our panelists joining us from online. Mr. Bhattacharjee, how are you seeing things from the prime metals perspective?
Yeah, thank you. Am I audible? Can you hear me? Am I audible? Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. Please
Can you
continue.
hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I was just not sure. So short introduction from my side. I am Bishwadeep Bhattacharjee, Vice President, Prime Metals Technologies and Head of Green Steel for the company. I'm also part of the Ministry of Steel task forces on energy efficiency, green hydrogen and carbon capture. So I'd like to thank IE and TERI for having me here and also being part of this esteemed panel here. So I believe a lot has been spoken already on the challenges and the way ahead. What I will try to do is to speak on behalf of the plant builder. So we are the plant builders. We develop the technologies, we make the research and development, and then it is deployed by the steel producers. So we sort of play a unique role being caught between our customers, their requirements, and the social requirements and the government and regulatory requirements. So we have a pretty unique situation given the current focus on decarbonization. So on the one hand, we have our business as usual. You know, India will still be much on the blast furnace and the BOF route. Expected 65% plus of the production will still continue, which means that there will be still the high specific CO2 consumption in the integrated plant route. Along with will come the tendency and the pressures to focus on the technologies of decarbonization. And what we believe from Prime Metals Technologies perspective is that the journey to decarbonization is a long one. Our targets to net zero are 2070. There will be three phases of this journey from our perspective. So we will have a short-term perspective, a short-term goal, which is mostly the low-hanging fruit, as was discussed, focus on energy efficiency, process, material efficiency, try to do whatever is achievable to recover the process heat. Any temperature beyond 300 degrees centigrade can really be commercially recovered and put back into the steel plant. But going ahead in the midterm, there will be a need for focusing on the transition to green steel, topics like DRI, then participation of hydrogen in the integrated plant project will come in. Also, the partial use of carbon capture, utilization, and storage shall also be seen in the next few years. In the long term, we are going to see fully flexible hybrid melt shops which can feed on renewable power. And there will be a full-scale deployment of carbon capture, utilization, storage solutions. So maybe because it may be better to show you a slide. I would like to just show you a presentation. Let me see. Just let me know if you can see my screen.
Great. Just making you
Is-
presenter
is-
mode.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Is
we
my
can see
screen
now.
visible?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the story that I was just trying to say is can be seen on this slide. So an optimization phase, and then I spoke about the transition phase, and then a long-term phase where we go for a carbon direct avoidance and full-scale deployment of carbon capture. So we are working with our customers entirely on this journey now. So a lot of our customers are focusing on the short-term measures, looking at what is possible within the plant. Of course, Tata Steel is very much there as a decarbonization partner. So we are working with them. We have done the R&D and worked with a joint R&D with Tata on the blast furnace injection that was referred by the panelist. As very well mentioned, we have used only a portion of the injection systems in the blast furnace at Jamshedpur, and the target now is to scale up. It's a very good coincidence that a few days back was the rollout of the policy for use of hydrogen in pilot projects. This was a very decisive measure. 50 million euros or so is what is the budget I noted, but definitely, as also mentioned by other panelists, there will be need to increase significantly these outlays for hydrogen-based pilots, and this is the only way we can encourage other customers, other steel producers to think about offsetting a portion of their carbon footprint. Very well mentioned also that this is not the solution permanently to come down a lot on the specific CO2 consumption, but definitely 8 to 10% can immediately be achieved. So we will work with Tata Steel also in this, the phase increase of hydrogen injection. A lot of other customers are also very interested in this topic of hydrogen because they are not only looking at it as a mechanism to reduce the CO2 footprint, partially yes, but more to learn how to work with hydrogen. Hydrogen has a unique property in terms of being a very inflammable gas with a low ignition point and quite penetrable in the valve situation. So safety aspects of hydrogen is something that we all need to know and work together, and we need to share the knowledge of how to work with hydrogen. So I was just talking about some of these best available technologies, also was referred to our learned speakers, that if you look at the major part of the upstream in the agglomeration blast furnace and the converter steel making phase, you still have a lot of tools and techniques which are well used across the world in US, Europe, and in Asia, where you can recover up to 25% of the carbon footprint, between 25% to at least 40%. There was mention of increasing the scrap in the steel making phase, very much required. We are currently between 8 to 10% on an average. We can easily go up to 80% of scrap in the BOF. We can recover the heat from the sinter making in the pelletization and can offset the coke breeze up to 7 to 10%. So some of these which are highlighted on your screen are currently already either under deployment or commissioning or under serious consideration by most of the steel producers. So there is light ahead. I think at least the major steel producers, even now the government steel producers are talking to us, and I'm sure with our players like us in the industry for deployment of such best available technologies. What I would like to mention here is the optimization phase will only reach to a certain level, and this is the time we should also start developing and thinking about parallel technologies like DRI was mentioned by Mr. Kashiva very well. Uh, Also to note that DRI, as of now, is the challenge is that the cost of natural gas is, pretty high. So this is not commercially viable. So availability, of course, but also the cost. I think it's noted that the cost of ammonia must come down to $0.4 per kg. It's about 10 times of that. If you look at also the hydrogen making, our electrolyzer costs are somewhere between $700 to $1,200 per kilowatt. if it is PEM, and if it is alkaline, of course, it comes down. But this has to come down up to 40 to 60% to achieve that target of 3.1 to $2 per kg of hydrogen production. So even the hydrogen injection that we did was definitely not green hydrogen. And the point that I'm trying to make is the hydrogen-based technologies are under development. We are also developing our HY4 and HYREX technologies to look at hydrogen-based reduction of iron ore. But we will deploy them much later in this decade. So somewhere around 27, 28, we will do the commercial full-scale deployment worldwide of these technologies. Also in India, there is a lot of interest on these technologies because the likes of Tata, Jindal, and AMNS are talking to us because they would like to incorporate some of these technologies also for their future. It takes typically 3 to 4 years even to commission a plant and then to stabilize. So they're already talking to us. So I see definitely the opportunity that these technologies are being seriously considered. There are challenges in terms of how it will come into the plant, for example. So the supply of hydrogen is a big topic. Also, Kashivaji really well mentioned that in terms of the transportation of hydrogen, the pipelines, the concern is where do I get the hydrogen and do I need to invest in hydrogen or is it the job of the government? And that's the discussion that also needs to happen more seriously. So the steel producers can focus on the steel making and not thinking of another sort of headache on bringing the hydrogen into the plant. So they just, on a consumption base, can work on using the hydrogen inside the plant. We still have to work a lot also on the demand side, was very well mentioned by the panelists from Tata Steel. The demand part is very significant because the cost of green steel would be very, very high. It can't be passed to the consumer in India. So similar to the IRA Act that we have in US, there has to be a subsidy on the carbon capture utilization. There has to be a commitment from the government to buy such green steel, at least for public procurement. And this will sort of move the wheel of demand and enable the steel producers to produce green steel. If I look at carbon capture, last year there was a very good white paper made by Planning Commission. Of course, Kashivaji, me are part of that panel on carbon capture, and we have proposed also the same that was mentioned to incentivize and provide subsidy for carbon capture and utilization. The same problem like hydrogen, the focus of the steel producer is to make the best steel, the best quality steel in the most productive way. They should not be worried about the CO2 converted into ethanol or methanol, how to take it from the plant and whom to sell it. So we should have an ecosystem where such byproducts of conversion of carbon should already be taken up by the supply chain, be it whoever in the ecosystem. But the challenge we have faced when we have spoken to our customers that they are very happy if we can deploy a CCUS. Primetals is part of Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, and we have the largest references of CCUS across the world. 70% of the industrial emissions goes through our patented process KMCDR. But we have realized that our customers are always worried that what do I do with the ethanol or the methanol, because these are also inflammable and have safety topics. So the offtake needs to be taken care of, and I'm sure going ahead with this subsidy, if it comes in, as Kashivaji mentioned, and we can develop an ecosystem, then the CCUS approach will really work in India. And CCUS can help a lot because it's probably the cheapest and with very tested TRLs, technical realization levels, because it has always worked in the power plant and the cement industry. It's never been so-called tested in the steel industry. Of course, Primetals is working at ArcelorMittal for the first carbon capture pilots. Tata Steel also has done about 5 kg, as was mentioned. But the target is to go really high. This is 5 kg and so on will not is not the real life production scenario. We have to scale up to 650 or so on a minimum. Yeah, so this is, I would say, the main topic or path that we are seeing in terms of decarbonization in India. You will note, and I'm sure we are aware, the situation is quite different in Europe, where there is a immense pressure from the government. Also, there is immense support and financing of all these projects. And I think this is what is missing. The 2nd February guideline on hydrogen is a big plus, but we need to do much more. Yeah. Thank you.
Very many thanks for your comments. And I think the positive thing is we've heard I'd say, similar conclusions from our 3 panelists on the need for a variety of different technologies, from efficiency and material efficiency in the shorter term, transition to hydrogen and carbon capture in the longer term, and the types of solutions needed in terms of demand creation, public procurement, finance support, provision of infrastructure, hydrogen, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, good to see approaches coming together, and I think all of us are looking forward to working together on this. We're running out of time for the session. I would maybe pass the final word to Mr. Sethi from TERI, if you'd like to give a few comments, and I'd also really like to thank our panelists for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Tiffany. I think, yes, we are coming to the close. I think, unfortunately, we did not get a time to really get questions from the panelists, but I would really like to use this last 4 or 5 minutes to give 1 or 2 perspectives from my side. Hearing the whatever you mentioned, Tiffany, at the start, and I think you gave a global perspective of what is happening in Europe. Of course, I think the needle is moving in Europe the way you have shown in your bar charts, that one could see mostly action in Europe, I think, on green steel in Sweden and other parts of Europe. And when you gave the overall technological pathways, I could see that whatever was mentioned by Tata Steel by you in your presentation broadly reflects what is happening in Europe. Whatever Mr. Kashiva mentioned again in terms of the pathway where we have to move towards hydrogen and natural gas and DRI, again, that is the same. And what Mr. Bhattacharya from Prime Metals mentioned, everybody broadly, I think what can see is that at least today we are seeing that the pathway on steel for decarbonization is aligned. Of course, there are huge challenges and barriers which one can see in terms of nobody has talked, I think, about the capital costs of all these technologies, which will be phenomenal, which is far higher than what we actually have on the BF routes. But the point is that, yes, there is a kind of alignment that these are the paths on hydrogen as well as CCS where the industry has to move forward. I would like to just mention 1 or 2 additional points, I think, which I think you mentioned, I think, Ms. Jaiswal. I think very key for a country like India would be to create the demand for green steel, I think. And I think the fact is that I remember some of the conversations with the senior management 4 or 5 years back, I think before Tata Steel had announced its targets for the net zero, that since the initial costs are going to be higher, it will be very, very difficult for one single producer to start making and giving it in a country like India, which is so cost sensitive. So I think the larger story will be that there has to be some way, the way it is happening in Europe, where buyers clubs are coming in, IDD has taken the route. So some premium on the green steel in terms of the perspectives of how one can move. And I think I was hearing in one of the other panels that maybe some of the segments which use steel, perhaps the automobile sector and all, which is catering to the export market as well, could be one of the prime targets to really start focusing on those areas where some actions can be made. The other, I think, is a very important thing, which was very briefly referred to by, I think, 2 of the panelists, I think is the very, very recent announcement last week by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, earmarking specifically 475 crores of rupees only for pilots and R&D on green hydrogen. I think this is a very, very huge, significant step. One can say yes, we want more, but to me, it's a very significant step where the government has come forward and laid down the guidelines for a specific technology. I don't remember like this for a pilots and R&D, any other major program by any ministry in government of India where they have come up with a program for supporting the industry on that. And I think all the work which Tata Steel has initiated along with Prime Moltons and others, I think on hydrogen injection and all that is definitely an area where more action can happen. And I think again the R&D efforts on biochar and all, which many of the companies are looking at. I think that's an area in India, MNRE and many of the companies on the corporate sector are very active on the bio side. I think that's an area where more action perhaps can happen in India. And I think here again, international collaboration would be very useful. I understand in Brazil as well, I think there are experiments happening in this field. So with this, I think I would just like to conclude. I think we're coming to the end, and I would like to thank first of all, IEA, I think, Tiffany, I do not know whether our colleague Will Hall is there on the line. If he is there, I would like to thank you, Will Hall, for putting this together. I think he was with TERI for a long time. And yeah, Will, we can see you, I think, finally. Here some of you people would have seen him. I think Will Hall is the one who has helped TERI put all these reports together initially in the initial formative years. So thanks, Will, we were hoping you would be here, but we'll like to have you next time in India. And then, of course, Rebecca, I think thanks for all the support in this. And of course, all the panelists, Mr. Kashiva, always with us, Tata Steel, and of course, Prime Metals, Mr. Bhattacharya. We could not get SAIL on board. I think there was some last minute requirement for Mr. Subaraj to join in another meeting. But I think I just wanted to mention that TERI has been working closely with SAIL as well to see, along with the World Bank, to see whether we can think of a pilot hydrogen-based DRI at one of their sites. So that's something good which I think is important to look at. So thanks everybody for joining in. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Please proceed for tea and coffee at the hub. Also, please join us for the thematic track starting at 4 p.m. In various venues. You can check it on the website. Thank you.